only see how the question paper pattern was for this year's CLAT examination, how the passages were there, how did they ask the questions, and how you have to attempt the questions whenever you are doing legal reasoning homework. Right? Before going into our sessions, let us set two ground rules. The first rule is whenever you have any doubt at any point, if you do not understand anything or if you feel I'm going a bit fast, do not hesitate to stop it. We will clarify the doubts and then we will proceed. It might so happen that some of your friends might be having that same doubt, but they might be a bit hesitant to ask, but you take an initiative so that everyone will get benefited. And the second important rule is never forget the first rule. Okay? So now, before starting the session, there are few important aspects that you have to remember when you are solving the question paper for legal reasoning. The first thing, which is a basic rule and important rule for any kind of passage related questions, is that you have to read the passage carefully. Agree with me?
Recording in progress.
Do you agree that you have to read the passage carefully for any kind of passage related questions?
Yeah.
Yes. So, now what is an added advantage or benefit, especially with respect to this legal reasoning component? One is that whatever the question that is asked to you, it will be only confined to the passage, the concept that is given in that passage. Now, for you people, the passage is your treasure, and as a reasonable person, you should always know what is there in the treasure box. If you don't know any of it, or if you miss any certain part of your treasure box, then you will be at loss, that is, you will lose your marks. It is really very easy to gain marks in this legal reasoning section because the questions have the answers in your passage itself. So always remember, read the passage thoroughly, word to word, do not skip any one particular line in the passage. And the next important rule is confine yourselves to the boundaries of the passage. Do not go beyond the passage. Right? Why? Because they do not test you how well you know about certain legal concepts. They only test you how well you are able to apply the concept that is given to you to a given set of facts. That is the only test that they will give to you. Now, the next thing. Once you read the passage, what you will do? You will go to the questions, right? First, read the question. Now, most of you or all of you at certain cases will know the answer to each of the questions given in those passages without even reading all the four options given to you. But when, okay, there is a question in the chat box. There is any use of knowing the principal prior? Yes, absolutely there is a use. How there is a use? Now say for example, there is a concept about murder and IPS. Now there are few ingredients which say that how a murder is constituted, when a crime of murder is committed. Only when those ingredients are satisfied, you will say that the murder is committed. It is not necessary for you to remember all those ingredients. But if you have a basic understanding about the concept of murder, when you can say that the murder is committed, or when you can say that this falls under an exception, not exactly murder, when you have a prior understanding about it. Now, when you have this prior understanding about that concept, even if the passage given to you is a bit twisty, like they can play with the words that they use in the passage. They may not always give you the passage in a straight cut manner, meaning thereby they can twist the words, they can make it a little bit tricky for you, where there is a chance that you get confused with the kind of words they use in the passage. Now, when you have a prior understanding about the concept, it makes your job easy. Also, there might be passages which are very lengthy. Now, few students, even me, at some point of time, what we tend to do is that whenever a passage is lengthy, we often try to do what? Skip the passage and go to next to the passage. But if you have a prior understanding about that particular concept, what you do is you will get that sense of confidence. With that confidence, what you do? You will try to read the passage. And when you start reading the passage, because of the existing knowledge, it becomes easy for you to understand the passage, and there will be a flow when you are reading the passage. You will not get stuck at any point of time. Otherwise, if you are not aware of that particular concept, you might want to go back to the first line and then start again whenever you are stuck at any point of time. So this is why we are teaching you few concepts which have the probability, or there is a likely chance that such concepts are to be asked in the CLAT question paper. Only reason is to make the job for you people easy, to save the time, to attempt the questions, every question given under that particular section, and to gain most of the marks under each passage. Understood, Bhupati Raju?
Yeah.
Yes. So that is the reason why we are having these sessions. So now, after you read the passage, the next thing we do is we go to the questions. We read the question. So as I was saying, if you have read the question, there is a chance that you know the answer to the question even without reading all the options given to you. Why and when this condition applies? If and only if you have read the passage completely, thoroughly, with a perfect understanding of the concept. Now, when do you get this perfect understanding of the passage? If you read it properly. So, always remember, the basic and the most important thing for you is read the passage. This is really, really important. That is why I am stressing you time and again. Now, after reading the question, certain cases, in your merry and happy moment on a fine day, you will know the answer then and there itself. Or the worst case, yes, you have to go and read all the options. Now, again, so I'll ask you people a simple question. Is it always necessary that you have to read all the 4 options completely word to word? Do you think it is necessary? Any one of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So, does anyone feel that no, it is not always necessary? Anyone? Or is it only me who thinks that otherwise? Okay, now I'll tell you people why it is not always necessary that you read all the 4 options completely. Now, before I say why, let's do a small exercise. Okay, now I want all of you people to concentrate and listen to this one particular statement that I am making. Say, for example, I make a statement saying that A has killed B. I'll write it to you here in the chat box. Now, A has B. This is the statement I made. Clear? Any doubts with that statement? Does anyone have any doubt with that statement?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So, now I'll give you 4 options for this question. Okay? Think this one statement as your passage, and now I'm giving you the 4 options. The first option is A did something wrong which he should not be doing otherwise. This is your first option. Then the second option is he committed murder as per the provisions of IPC, that is Indian Penal Code. Now we have our third option that says he did nothing wrong. He hated A. So A did something, some act, or he said something because of which B made some statements and instigated A, and in that instigation, A has done something resulting in the death of B. This is your third option. And the fourth option says both A and C are right answers. So now you people are feeling that no, whenever a question is given to you followed by four options, you have to read all the four options thoroughly to answer that particular question. Now what I will teach you people is that when you have read that A has killed B, can you make out a conclusion that yes, A has done something wrong? It is obvious. Right or wrong?
It's right.
Yes. So this much we can make out from that particular statement that A has definitely done something wrong. Whatever may be the reasons why A has killed B, we are not getting into those reasons. At the end of the day, what remains the basic thing is that A has done something wrong because due to his act, a person has lost his life. Now, from among the four options, now you can eliminate few options which say that A did not do anything wrong. Agree with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Right? Now, from among the four options, which of the options will say that A did not do anything wrong?
Option
Yes, option is. Now, you really need not put in a lot of time to read option A, right? A did something wrong. Then, can you eliminate any other option? Anyone? The first option that you can eliminate is that which says A did not do anything wrong. Now, okay, the option which says A did not do anything wrong is your third option, not the first option. Third option says that A did nothing wrong because B instigated A and so he has killed. Agree with it? Do you agree with me? So now you have easily eliminated one option which says otherwise to the given set of questions. Then you are left with three other options. Now if you closely observe the fourth option, it says both A and C are right answers. Now you have just now eliminated the option 3, right? Now when option 3 is not the right answer, then option 4 which says that option 3 might also be a right answer can be eliminated easily. Agree with me?
Yes.
Right? So now you have easily eliminated both third option and fourth option. Now again in the fourth option itself it says that A and C both are right answers. Now one you have eliminated the third option. Now go back to the first option. A did something wrong. Yes, we agreed that A did something wrong. But do you think this itself will make that particular option to be the answer for this question? To understand that, yes, you have to now read entirely the second option, which is the left out option, which can also be the answer to the given set of questions. And our final rule here is that always remember, in the legal reasoning component, you will never have a 100% accurate answer to any set of questions given to you, especially when it is passage-based questions, which require application of mind. Remember, there is no 100% accurate answer. The only thing that you can find out from among the four options given to you is that what option will be the most appropriate, best fitted answer to the given set of facts. Understood? Or do you want me to repeat this? Okay, I'll take it as an yes. I'm repeating it again. Never find for any answer which is 100% to it, which requires application of your mind. Right. Here, both A and B are the possible options, but option B is the most appropriate one. Exactly, 100% right. That's what I'm telling you. There can be 2 or 3, or at worst case, 4 options can be the possible answers to the given set of questions. But only one will be the most appropriate option that will best suit to the given set of questions. Now, in this question that I have asked you people, first option is possible answer. Also the second option, it is also the possible answer. But which gives you the most appropriate one is second option. Now, why I'll tell you? Because it says A has committed murder, and it says why you are saying that A has committed murder. It is because of the reason that there are certain provisions that are given under your Indian Penal Code. Because of those set of provisions, you are saying that A has committed a murder, right? Now, just saying that A did something wrong is like an incomplete answer. You also have to justify why you are making that particular option. And also remember that whenever you are eliminating any particular option, have a reason why you are eliminating that particular option. Say for example, among the 4 given options, you have eliminated 3 options straight away. You have valid reasons as to why you think that these 3 are not your options. Then you need not even read the 4th option. Blindly you can put the answer as the 4th option, because you already know why the above 3 are not the right answer. So definitely the 4th one should be the right answer. So these are some of the tips that you have to use while doing any competitive examination to save your time. Now, did you people understand the approach that we are going to follow now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So now I will share my screen. With this introductory remarks, we will start with the question paper solving. So can you people see this document?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, in this 2021 question paper, there are 8 passages under the legal reasoning component. Now, because of our time constraints, we may not be able to do all the 8 passages. I'll try to complete 2 to 3 passages in this session, and the rest of the passages I expect you people to solve on your own. Okay? And if you are stuck at any point, or if you find it difficult to understand the passage, let me know. You can take my contact number from Amaresh sir, and then you can contact me. And if we think that most of your people are stuck at one particular passage or any particular question, then we can have a small discussion in the next session. Okay? Just sit after this class, try to read the passage, try to attempt the questions, also see how much time you are taking to read the passage, understand the passage, and attempt the questions. See for yourself. Cross check how many questions you have corrected or you have done rightly, and why the rest of the questions have gone wrong. Where did you lack? Make a self-assessment. You need not tell me how many marks you scored or to your friends. Just a self-assessment. This will give you a confidence. It will boost you. If you have attempted most of the questions and you have got most of the questions correctly, that means yes, you are on the right path. And if you think that you haven't got most of the questions correct, then you should get that confidence from that. You should get that motivation from that next time you have to do it perfectly, or you have to attempt most of the questions. So now we will see this first passage. I have selected like 3 passages for today, which are from, one is from law of torts, then other one is from law of contracts, and the final one is from law of crimes. And these 3 passages are at a different set of difficulty. One is a easy one, then the other one is a bit twisty, then the third one is a bit moderate. So now at the end we will see which one is easy, which one is moderate, and which one is a bit twisty. So shall we start with this first passage?
Yeah, ma'am.
Now, first line goes like this: harm suffered voluntarily does not constitute a legal injury and is not actionable. So, in this first sentence itself, you find few words which are not generally used. Say, for example, harm, it is generally used, which means that you have suffered some kind of injury to your body, right? Then there is the other word voluntary, which means that you yourself have undertaken that particular risk. Then there is something called legal injury. Now remember, whenever we use a phrase legal injury, it implies any kind of injury either to your body, that means personal injury to you, or an injury to your reputation, injury to your property. So there are wider aspects involved in a legal injury. All those injuries are covered within this one particular phrase. And there is another term actionable. So what is actionable? Actionable means you having a right to file for an action, that is a case or a suit in a court of law. That is the meaning of action. Now we read it together. Harm suffered voluntarily does not constitute a legal injury and is not actionable. It means that if you have suffered any harm, either to your body, to your property, or any kind of injury, voluntarily, that is out of your own risk, at your own peril, then you cannot file for a suit or for a complaint in any court of law. That is what is meant by the first line. Now next it continues to say that this principle is embodied in the maxim volunty non fit injuria. Now this is called a legal maxim, and as the students preparing for CLAT examination, you are expected to know few legal maxims which are very basic. You need not always remember the exact meaning. It is also okay if you can make out why the particular maxim is used in the given set of context. Now, volunty non fit injuria, what does it mean? It means that a person cannot complain of harm to the chances of which he has exposed himself with his free consent and free will. Now, there is a situation, you have exposed yourself to that situation with your free consent and free will. No one has asked you to enter into that situation. No one has forced you or pushed you in that situation. You yourself have entered into a situation, and because of that, you have suffered some kind of harm or injury. In that situation, you cannot complain against any other person that because of so and so person only I have entered into that situation, or so and so person has caused that situation and so I have suffered this harm or injury. You cannot make a complaint against that somebody else. This is the principle of volunty non fit injuria. Now, the maxim volunty non fit injuria is founded on good sense and justice. Now, what is this good sense and justice? Say, for example, Neil. So, Neil complains that Bhupati has pet him. He complained to me that Bhupati had pet him. So, what I do is that without asking Bhupati what has happened or what was the situation, I directly give some punishment to Bhupati. Now, is there justice served here? Maybe from the point of view of Neil, yes, justice is served. But is it the right justice that has been served? No. You have to balance all the odds that are given in a particular situation. First, you have to understand what has happened, why it has happened, because of whom that situation has aroused. After balancing all these questions only, you will be able to give the justice properly. So, this principle is founded on the good sense and justice. That is, if you have done something and because of your own actions itself you have suffered from a harm, then it is not right on your part to blame it on someone else and to get that someone else punished for something which they haven't actually done. This is the concept of volunty non fit injuria. Are you making out what I am saying?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm reminding you again, if you have any doubt at any point, please stop me. We will clarify the doubt. Now the next set says, a person who has invited or assented to an act. Assent in the sense given consent. Being done towards him cannot, when he suffers from it, complain of it as a wrong. Now, for this statement, I'll give you a small example. Now, whenever I feel that I am falling asleep in any class, what I will do is that I will ask my friend sitting next to me to pinch me harder so that I will come back to the class. Okay, I think some of the people might be doing this also. So now here, I have invited this particular situation. Agreed that my friend has to pinch me whenever she sees or thinks that I am falling asleep in the class. Now, when I have invited the situation myself, and when that particular act is done to me, and if I think that because of that I have suffered, now she has pinched me because I have asked her to do so, and I felt an excruciating pain, and then it is not up to me to go to someone else and blame that she has pinched me and now I am suffering from that pain. Agreed with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So, in simple, this is your voluntary non-fit injuria. If you have invited a situation to come to you, and because of that, if you have suffered something, then you cannot complain that it is a wrong which is done by somebody else. Now, the maxim presupposes a tortious act by the defendant. So, there is a term called defendant here. Now, always remember, in a civil suit, there will be two parties, one is plaintiff and the other one is defendant. Plaintiff is the person who complains or who goes to the court with a suit, and the defendant is the person against whom the suit is filed. Now, in this particular example that I have given to you, Niyuda and Bhupati, Niyud will be the plaintiff who is going with the complaint or who will be filing a suit, and Bhupati is the person against whom the suit is being filed, so he becomes the defendant. Now, who can claim this voluntary non-fit injuria? Is it the plaintiff or the defendant? It is the defendant. Why? Because the defendant will say that he has voluntarily done something on his own, and because of that, he has suffered something. So, it is not up to me, it is not me the sole reason why he has suffered something. When he himself has done something and got suffered, voluntarily he took the risk. So, I am not the person who has to be blamed. So always remember, voluntary non-fit injuria is a defense that is claimed by the defendant. Now, this maxim presupposes a tortious act. Now, what is a tortious act? Tortious act is an act which is wrong, which is not otherwise accepted by you or by me, or for that matter by anybody else. That is a tortious act. The maxim applies in the first place to intentional acts which would otherwise be tortious. Now, in that example I gave about me, otherwise if she is pinching me, it is a wrongful act. But because of me giving her consent, it does not become a wrongful act. That is what the passage is trying to conclude in this part. Now, this particular maxim, it has few limitations. Limitations in the sense exceptions where this maxim cannot appear. Or you can otherwise say that the defendant cannot claim the defense of voluntary non-fit injuria. So we will again discuss in detail about all these concepts when we start with our regular classes. Now, the first defense says that it is no answer to a claim made by a workman against his employer for injury caused through a breach by the employer of a duty imposed upon him by a statute. But where the negligence or the breach of statutory duty is on the part of an employee of the plaintiff who knowingly accepts the risk flowing from such breach and the employer defendant is not guilty of negligence or breach of statutory duty, the defense of voluntary non-fit injuria is available to the defendant. So, in simpler words, what it says is that suppose there is a workman and an employer. Take a situation of a factory where people are exposed to greater risk when they are working in the factory. Now, for suppose something happened to the workman, he has suffered with an injury while he is working in the factory. And why he has suffered the injury? It is because of the fault of the employer. when there is a fault on the part of employer due to which the employee, the workman, has suffered some kind of injury, then the employer cannot say that the workman has agreed to whatever the conditions he would be put into when he works in the factory. And so, no, I am not liable if any injury is caused to him. Say, for example, the workman is lifting heavy weights. Just a minute, there is a question. But worker is working at his own risk. Yes, agreed. But to what risk the workman is agreed? If there are natural risks that are prone to occur in that particular kind of environment, yes, the protection is available to the employer. But the situation that we are seeing here is that if the risk has come due to a breach on the part of employer. Say for example, now you might be seeing these welding shops where the people who are using that fire to weld the iron or any other metal, they will be given a shield to protect their face. Agreed? Can you relate it?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So why is that shield given to that particular employee when he is working, the workman? So that when he is using that fire, the sparkles will not either contact his eyes or the face and cause any kind of injuries. Now, if the employee did not, the workman did not use the shield properly, and then if he has suffered any kind of injury, then the employer is not at risk. Agreed?
Yes.
Right. But say for example, the employer has given a shield, but the shield is of poor quality, and when that fire was emitted from doing that work, some sparkles had touched his shield. It has touched his shield, and due to the poor quality of the shield, they further went and hit his face and caused some kind of injury to his eye. Now, in that case, is it not the fault of the employer because of which the employee, the workman, has suffered the injury?
Absolutely, no. It's the folly of the employees.
Right. Now, when I am saying here, through a breach by the employer of his duty, is the duty of the employer to take all the precautions that he is expected to take so that the workman will not suffer any kind of damages or any kind of injuries. Now, when he has made a breach of that duty, breach in the sense he has not followed that duty correctly, and because of such breach, if the workman has suffered anything, then this defense is not available to the employer. The employee can file for an action against the employer. Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Now the next set of exception. Under an exigency caused by the defendant's wrongful misconduct. So exigency in the sense an emergency situation. Now, how this emergency situation has come? It is come because of the defendant's wrongful misconduct. So, he has done something on his part which is not generally acceptable. And how he has done that? Consciously and deliberately. He has done something wrong. And the next sentence is consciously and deliberately faced a risk even of death, whether the person endangered is one to whom he owes a duty of protection as a member of his family, or is a mere stranger to whom he owes no such special duty. Now, what this sentence is trying to say is that if the defendant, by his act, he has caused a situation, an emergency kind of situation, and if some person has entered into such situation consciously and deliberately facing that risk, even if the risk is to ultimately to be dead in taking such risk, the person who endangered his life in that situation, he will not be turned down if he comes up with an action saying that because of you, because of your misconduct, I have suffered so and so loss. Now you have to repay. or you have to provide me some kind of compensation. So let's simplify this. I'll give you a situation. Now think for suppose there is a building, firecrackers are being manufactured in that building. Now a person, say for example I being a notorious one, what I did is that I had used a matchstick inside the building. Now since it is a crackers manufacturing unit, because of using that matchstick, all the crackers started to burn up and there is a big fire explosion. Now, is it not the misconduct on my part because of which there is a fire accident? Agreed with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Now, Bhupati, you have seen that a small child is being stuck in that fire. So, as a responsible citizen, your immediate response to that situation is that you entered into the building, you know that the fire is there, it will cause some kind of injury to you if you enter into the building, but even then, you have taken the risk voluntarily, you have entered into the building, you have saved the child. But in the course of action, there are some kind of burns onto your body and you had to admit into the hospital to get the treatment. Now it costed you some around 10 to 20,000, whatever it might be. Now after completion of your treatment, you have come out of the hospital and then you have filed a complaint against me saying that you have filed an action in the court of law against me saying that because of my wrongful misconduct, the fire has broke up and in that process to save a child, I have suffered so and so injury. Now, when I am called to the court of law, it is not my defense to say that no, I just lighted the matchstick, it took on to the fire. I never asked you to enter into the building to save the life of the child, nor did the mother or the father of the child ask you to save the life of the child. It is you who voluntarily entered into the building. I never asked you. For that matter, no one ever asked you to enter into the building to save the life of the child. In that situation, you have taken the risk voluntarily. I am not the responsible person. Can I say that? Can I take that defense? What do you think?
Ma'am, I suppose it's punishable.
Right, it is punishable. Why? The situation has happened because of my misconduct. If it is a normal day due to a normal situation, the fire has broke out, then no, I am not liable. But it is clearly my fault because of which the fire has broke out. In that situation, I cannot take any of such defense saying that I am not the person to be blamed. It is you have to blame yourself for taking the risk and for getting injured yourself. Understood till this part?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Now the rescuer, in this example it is Bhupati, will not be deprived of his remedy merely because the risk which he runs is not the same as that run by the person who he rescues. But where there is no need to take any risk, the person suffering harm doing so cannot recover. Now, say for example the fire has broke out but there is no one inside to be saved. Bhupati has voluntarily entered inside and he has suffered some kind of injury. In such situation, there is no need for Bhupati to enter into that building. He voluntarily entered. Then at that time, no, I am not liable. Only if there is some kind of loss or injury caused to some other person because of my misconduct, then only you can claim. Now, this voluntary non-fit injuria, the first exception is that in case of in the rescue cases, the rescuer can always claim for the amount of damage or the loss that he has suffered. Now, the next set of cases that to cover a case of negligence, the defense on the basis of the maxim must be based on implied agreement, whether amounting to contract or not. Now, what is an implied agreement? Implied in the sense you do not say it directly through your words, or you do not write, pen down your words on a piece of paper and then agree. Say, for example, you have a bike, your friend has called you and asked you that shall we go out for a weekend trip? Then you said yes. So, weekend trip, a long drive. When he has stated that, you said yes. It means that impliedly you both have agreed to take the trip on your bike. It's something like of that sort. So you do not directly say it through your words or through something written on a piece of paper, but you both know what you are agreeing with. That is your implied agreement. The defense is available only when the plaintiff freely and voluntarily, with the full knowledge of the nature and extent of the risk, impliedly agreed to incur it and to weighing any claim for injury. Now I'll give you a small example to understand this. Say for example, you never went to Hyderabad, but now you have got a job in Hyderabad, so you have to fly to Hyderabad. Now you went to Hyderabad. You have a general knowledge that during rainy seasons it rains heavily in Hyderabad, and at times or most of the times in certain areas water becomes stagnant for days or for weeks, and it causes problem. And apart from that, there will be huge traffic jams in Hyderabad because it's a big city. Now you have went to Hyderabad. You have taken a room for rent in a location which is nearer to your office. Now you have asked your house owner, sir, I have heard that during the rainy season in Hyderabad it becomes really difficult because the water gets stagnant in most of the places, and the situation remains like that for some days or for some weeks. Now the owner told you that no, it is not that situation in our locality, and I have taken all the reasonable precautions to make sure that even if such situation comes, the water will not get stagnant, at least with respect to our house which is situated in this particular place. So he has given you an assurance that no, it will not come. And also he told that he has taken all the reasonable precautions. So, listening to this statement, you have agreed that, and also the owner told you that only in the worst of the worst situation, such kind of situation might arise, where the water might become stagnant completely, causing a lot of trouble. So, listening to your owner, since you are a new person to Hyderabad, you agreed to take out the room on rent. Now, in the next week or 2 weeks later, there was a normal rainfall, but however, the water became stagnant near to your house. Now, in this case, can you say that the person has voluntarily taken that room for rent, or is it the negligence on the part of house owner because he hasn't taken reasonable precautions that he should otherwise take, and because of his breach of duty the water was stagnant, and also he did not fulfill his promise properly? Now what do you think? Who is at fault in this particular situation? Is it?
Ma'am, I suppose the body of the
You suppose?
it's the folly of the owner, ma'am, because he said in the worst case scenario only the water it would be stagnant, but it's just a normal rainfall and the water was stagnant because he's faulty, ma'am.
Right. And also he stated that he has taken all the reasonable precautions. Agreed?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So when there comes such situation like that, where it is because of your negligence. Negligence in the sense you have some duty and you did not fulfill that duty. It amounts to negligence. You did not fulfill your duty, and because of that some person has suffered some kind of risk. Now this statement says that with full knowledge of the nature and extent of the risk implied, I have only agreed to a particular risk, that is the worst case situation. I have only agreed to that worst case situation, but not to a normal situation that might crop up now and then. So in such kind of situations, the defendant cannot plead the defense of quality non-petition. But when the plaintiff has no choice, or the notice is given at a stage when it is beyond the ability of the plaintiff to make a choice, there can be no implied agreement and the defense of the maxim must fail. Now, in such kind of situation, suddenly that situation has come to which he has never accepted or he has never anticipated. In that case, if he suffers anything, any kind of damages or loss, then he can get that back from the dependent who has caused such situation. Now the final situation is the maxim will also not apply when the act laid upon is done because of the psychological condition which the defendant's breach of duty had induced. Now, in this situation, the house owner has put the plaintiff, the person who has taken the room on hand, in such a situation that he doesn't know what to do in such kind of situation. He is a new person to the head pad, he don't know anyone around, in and around the city. Now, what he can do? He has to act immediately upon that. In doing so, under that psychological pressure, if something happens to him, if some injury happened to him, then the defendant will be liable. He cannot take the defense of this max. Now, did you understand the passage?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Is it only Bhukti or everyone understood the passage? Yeah, I'll take it that everyone understood the passage. Now, normally if you have the, yes, Lasya, thank you. So, if you had a basic understanding of this concept voluntary non-fit insuria, it becomes easy for you to read the passage and understand what is given in the passage. But if you do not have the prior understanding of this concept, then you might take longer time to understand the passage. This is how you can save your time by knowing few concepts at prior. Now let's solve few questions under this passage. Now this question says, Mr. A was the owner of a car and he had appointed a driver, Mr. D. Now on a particular day, A and D were traveling in their car. A got down at a particular restaurant and told D to take the car to the house. Now he was filling the petrol tank of the car on the way, and two strangers, B and C, they asked for it, for which D had agreed. Now three of the people are going in the car and suddenly there was an accident. C sustained some injury and because of that C died on the next day. Now B and C, C's legal representatives. Now can anyone guess who can be these legal representatives? Just a wild guess who you think can be a legal representative of this deceased person C. Anyone? Okay, then I'll tell you the answer. A legal representative can be your son, your child, your daughter, or your wife or husband, your parents, anyone who is your kith and kin. Immediate kith and kin can be your legal representatives. Or in other sense, a lawyer appointed by you or an agent appointed by you. All these people will be considered as the legal representatives. Now say for suppose that C's wife and children along with B, they have come and claimed compensation for his death from A and D. A is the coroner and D is the driver. Now what do you people do? Is the car owner and the driver liable for this accident?
Ma'am, car owner only should pay.
Car owner should pay. Okay. So rest of the people, do you agree with me or do you have any other answer? Yes, let's have this friendly discussion here. All of your answers are welcome. There is no right and there is no wrong answer here. Everyone, please tell me what you think in this particular situation. Is the car owner liable? Or is it the driver who is liable? Or both the car owner and car driver are liable? Liable in the sense be responsible for the accident that has occurred. Okay, then, okay, Umesh says both the car owner and the driver. Okay, Umesh. So, any more answers apart from these two answers? Neil said,
But the only car owner is liable.
okay, Bhupati says it's the car owner who is liable. And anyone else? Any more answers? Okay. So we'll directly go into the options because we have different answers from different people. So now, but first thing we have to do is we have to make out whether there is something wrong that has been done here or the situation is normal and there is no liability on any other person. Now, according to you people, there has been a wrong which is done on the part of either the owner or both the owner and the driver. Now, first understand the picture. Now, A has instructed his driver to take the car back to the house. Agreed? A has instructed his driver to take the car back to the house. Did he tell anything else apart from this particular task? Okay, I suppose maximum is not applicable as everything is done with person. Okay, Bhupati has changed his answer. He says that the maximum is not applicable. That is, okay. He says that they have maximum. Okay, you mean to say that because they have consented to enter into the car, they have voluntarily took the risk. That's it?
It's not.
Okay. Then you mean to say that the maximum applies, right? Voluntarily taking risk in the sense that maximum applies. So apart from that particular task, A did not direct anything else. Now it is D who has taken the strangers into the car. Okay. Now whenever you are taking risk from any other person, you are yourself putting you in a situation that if at all something happens, it is up to you. It is your own risk. Now, no person, no driver can guarantee you that he can take you safely to the destination point unless that driver has done something wrong on his part, either driving negligently or rashly, or he himself has gone on a wrong route. Because of that, if some accident has happened, then yes, you can blame the driver. But if you have asked the driver, I want to get down at this particular spot, can you drop me? And the driver has taken you on in humanitarian consideration. And when things were going properly and there was an accident, which maybe the driver could also not avoid it. In such situation, the driver cannot be blamed, nor for that matter the owner of the car, because do you think the car owner has any knowledge of what is happening later on? Okay, Bhupati says B and C have boarded with consent, right? So it's not applicable. Okay, right. Now, when do you say that voluntary non-fit is applicable? If you have voluntarily taken the risk, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Then the maximum applies, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So don't get confused. If you have taken the risk voluntarily, then the maximum applies. If you did not take the risk voluntarily, normally you can make the person liable. And when you can say that the maximum is not applicable is under the few exceptions that I have explained you people. So in this question, the car owner has no idea as to what is happening after he got down at the restaurant. It is the car driver who has taken those few people to drop them at certain point. And B and C, both of them have voluntarily gone to D and asked for the lift. D did not come to B and C. Agreed with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Right? So B and C voluntarily have took the risk. And maybe as you people told, driver can be made liable if at all the situation is like this. He had driven the car negligently or rashly due to which the accident has taken place. Yes, in that situation, you can make the driver liable. If not, no, the driver is not liable because accident is not the wrong that is done by the driver here. So now decide without going to the options who is the wrongdoer in this particular situation. Is it the car owner or the driver or the two strangers?
No one can be blamed.
Yes, so no one can be blamed. Now in that situation, can Mr. B and the representatives of C claim compensation from either the owner or the driver?
No man.
No, right?
Yes.
So they cannot claim any kind of compensation either from the owner or from the driver. So as I was telling you people, first you have to read the passage carefully. Now you have seen, personally witnessed how the words can make you go for a wrong option, or the words can make you a bit confused as to what is actually intended by the passage. Understood, right? Yes, passage is a bit lengthy, agree. But when a lengthy passage can become easy to you when you have the prior knowledge, or when you face the passage without any second doubt in your mind, right? Do not get scared about the length of the passage. First, try to read the passage. Give a one-time reading. If you did not make out anything, try to read it for the second time. And if you think that it might be waste of your time, you cannot attempt the other questions properly, then just skip that question, go to next questions, and then come back to the passage. Never waste your time for any passage or for any question if you think that it is taking more time than what is expected. This is another important thing that you have to remember in any competitive exam. So now, without seeing the options, now we have understood that neither the car owner nor the driver is liable here. So these two people cannot claim compensation. Now we will see the options. Now the first option says B will be liable to pay the compensation. B in the sense it is the driver. So now we have understood that driver is not liable. So rule out option A. Strike it off. Next option B says that voluntary non-fit injuria will be applicable and no compensation can be claimed. Yes, this is what we have approved. But can we stop at here? Let's see the two options as well. Voluntary non-fit injuria will not be applicable. Okay, it says will not be applicable, so I am not reading it completely. I am leaving it. Now the fourth option says A and D both will be liable to pay the compensation. Since we have already agreed that both are not liable, option D is also not an option, not the right answer. So the answer here is option B, which says that voluntary non-fit injuria is applicable and compensation cannot be claimed. Now the next question. It says Rama was a spectator at a motor car race being held on a track owned by the dependent company. During the race, there was a collision. One of the cars was thrown among the spectators, injuring Rama. Which of the following statements is correct? So from this question, what you can make out that Rama has voluntarily gone to the race, right? No one has asked Rama to go there. Agreed with that?
No.
Yes.
Ma'am, maybe due to the lack of necessary precautions, it has happened, right?
Right, that is a situation. But if it is that situation, then it would be given explicitly in the question. When such kind of exceptional situations are not mentioned in the question, you need not go beyond the scope. Okay?
Hello.
Yes. So she has voluntarily gone to the race, and it is a common knowledge to every one of us that during the car race, collisions are prone to happen. Agree with that? Do you agree that it is prone to happen that there might be collisions between the cars when there is a race happening? So I will agree that there is a chance that there can be such kind of accidents happening. Or even for that matter, if you take your cricket as an example, when the batsman is hitting a six, the ball is there is a chances that the ball might reach the might reach the stadium outside or to the audience who are sitting in the stadium. If it goes and touches any one of the audience enjoying the